Leslyn Lewis is running for the Conservative leadership. She joins us now. Hi there. Thank you very much for making the time for this.
Hi, Vashi. Nice to see you again.
You as well. I wanted to start off with some of the things that you're proposing through your candidacy on your website. And first of all, I guess your characterization of the latest federal budget as selfish. You said that you'd phase out the deficit and balance the budget. Over how many years?
Well, Vashi, I don't believe that it could be done within the first term because we have such a large deficit, and really people have really suffered during COVID, and there's really no appetite for cuts. So I would do it by finding efficiencies within the system, by upping our production, by bringing our supply chains home. Right now, we have a lot of money in the system from the stimulus packages that were given by the government. And we need to increase production so it's commensurate to that level.
So if I understand that correctly, you'd find efficiencies, you'd create economic growth that would see revenues increase. But just to be clear, you don't intend on making any major spending cuts?
Well, I don't believe that there's an appetite for that right now, Vashi, because there's been so much that Canadians have given up during COVID. I believe that there's a lot of waste in the system and that we can find efficiencies within the system and be better stewards of taxpayer dollars.
Can I drill down, I guess, on what you mean by efficiencies? And the reason I ask is because the narrative from your party following the budget, for example, the current interim leader, was not identical to yours. Certainly there was nobody saying there's no appetite for cuts. They were saying there needs to be some reining in of spending. When you talk about finding efficiencies, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar deficit. Are you saying that you'll be able to find, let's say, $10 billion of efficiencies, or that you'd spend a long time running a deficit before being able to balance? I know you said more than one term, but how much longer?
Yes. Well, Vashi, the budget doesn't address issues of inflation and cost of living. And so we need to increase our production and get people back to work. We need to develop our natural resources, get our products to Tidewater, take that revenues, pay down some of our debt. And also, we are paying $141 million a day just in interest payments. Once we pay down our debt, those interest payments go down. We could use those to start developing our infrastructure, building more roads, more affordable housing transfers to provinces, and issues that people really need in order to rebound and restart their lives from COVID.
Again, though, is it fiscally sound to say that finding efficiencies and increasing revenues, and I would point out revenues are already up $24 billion from what they were originally anticipated to be this fiscal year. Is it fiscally sound to say we're hoping revenues increase by doing a lot of things to create economic activity, we'll find some efficiencies, and then we'll balance the budget through that? Like, is that enough?
Yes, I do believe that that's enough, because once we up production, we are going to be increasing revenues even greater. I don't believe that we've optimized our natural abilities to create wealth and to increase production and to bring our supply chains home. We have not done that. And I believe that once we do that, we will have more dollars within our system. We will have more production, more productive dollars within the system, and we could use that to pay down our debt.
I want to ask you about another item on your website, or another plank of your platform, and this one is focused on the WHO's proposed pandemic treaty or accord. The accord has yet to even be drafted, but you're asserting on that page or on that release that Canada essentially could be surrendering our national health sovereignty to the WHO when it comes to responding to pandemics. How can you make that assertion when it hasn't even been drafted yet?
Well, I'm sounding the alarm, Vashi. I'm sounding the alarm. I'm letting people know exactly that there is a treaty that could potentially affect our healthcare sovereignty. Canada needs its own pandemic plan. We had one for SARS, and we need to put one in place for future pandemics. We need to plan the stages and how we're going to react, the types of medication that will be approved. So all of those things need to be done by our country. We cannot relinquish that responsibility to global organizations like the WHO.
But there is nothing so far to show that would be the case. And so again, I circle back to my original question, which is, you're okay, you say you're sounding an alarm, but on what basis? That's all just a potential theory. It's not borne out in any fact.
Oh, no, that's absolutely incorrect, Vashi. If 190 countries are getting together to put together the framework of a treaty and working on the wording, and they have met twice already in December and in March, that is not a theory. That is actually fact. And this is something that is happening. The WHO is proposing a global pandemic treaty, and that will limit a sovereign nation's ability to set things such as when the borders will be closed, what kind of personal protective equipment will be used. All of these things will be contained in the treaty.
Respectfully, you don't know that. The treaty has yet to be drafted. Respectfully, there has nothing that's been said that we will not be able to decide when our borders are open or when they're closed. Can you point to any sentence in any document that says that?
Well, actually, Vashi, as an international lawyer, I can tell you that the way treaties are drafted is people come together and they agree on the words, and it's come through consensus, Vashi. So there 190 countries meeting together to agree on the words. They have stated that it is a world pandemic treaty and that the treaty will be the treaty that responds to health care on a national basis. That has been stated, Vashi.
But again, with respect, I think I understand what you're saying, that there's this possibility that this could supersede, for example, if we sign up to it, which hasn't happened, but if we did, could supersede our own independent decision-making when it comes to the pandemic or when it comes to any future pandemic. But what I am saying is you're theorizing that will be the case, and maybe it will be, but it's not based on fact that exists right now. There is no documentation that says, or Canada has not signed up to any documentation, or even publicly said that it has arrived at the consensus that we will hand over control of our borders to a global organization. And in fact,
that's the way international law works, Vashi. Vashi, you have a misapprehension of international law, because the way international law works is that you consent to a treaty and then you are bound by that treaty.
Who has consented to this treaty?
That's the way it works. And so if 191 countries, Vashi, are meeting together to plan a world pandemic treaty and how it will impact on nations that sign on to that treaty, I say that we need to be vigilant about what we sign on to and what we consent to. We do not need the WHO to limit our healthcare sovereignty. We need to create our own pandemic strategy where our government is accountable to us. Canada is a sovereign nation. It should maintain control of its healthcare system, including its pandemic response and planning. We need to increase the capacity of hospitals to deal with the pandemic. We need to make sure that we have pandemic funding that will relieve some of the burden that was put on the healthcare system. When we look at lockdowns are an indication of a broken healthcare system. We need to make sure that we create beds, that we can better respond to pandemics. And we do not need an international organization like the WHO to tell us how to do that.
And certainly, I am not trying to take away from the points that you make there. I think many Canadians listening would agree with you that this country needs to take a very close look at the way in which it handled the pandemic, the way in which it might handle a future pandemic. What I am asking you, though, is why you're sounding an alarm and making an insinuation or an implication that Canada would give up its sovereignty to a global organization, which is part and parcel of bigger theories out there that are criticized as being conspiracy theories, right? To try and sort of undermine faith in global institutions. Why would you posit that kind of theory without evidentiary proof of it?
Because that is a fact. Because 191 nations are meeting to draft a global pandemic treaty. And that is a fact. It is not a conspiracy. It is not a theory. It is not conjecture. It is not postulation. It is actually happening. And so Canadians need to get involved and make sure that any treaty that they are bound to, that they are in agreement with that. And my position is that we need our own treaty. We need our own pandemic response before we can even contemplate any international treaty. We don't even have our own pandemic response. So how is it that we would not think that a global pandemic treaty that we sign on to would be the regulating factor when we do not have our own pandemic response? We need our own pandemic response, Vashi.
I totally understand that point. I guess my question was just around the fact that it hasn't even been drafted yet. But again, I do take your point.
It's in the process of being drafted. That is what I'm talking about. It's in the process.
There is no draft yet, though.
Right, but this is what I'm saying, Vashi, I never said there was a draft. I said that they're in the process of drafting a treaty. And so it's just like a contract. When a contract is in the process of being negotiated, you need parties to come together and set the terms. I am alerting Canadians to the fact that this is happening, and we do not even have our own pandemic response. So how can we be powerful at the table when we don't even know what we want as a nation? That is my point, Vashi.
Okay, thank you very much for making that point on this program. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Vashi.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.